allowed to breathe.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt, your chaotic writer, and we have 4 of the Project Aurora lore masters here to have a discussion about the newest in the Project Aurora mini project. And I want to thank everybody for popping in. And I got to turn the background audio down. That's taking up a whole bunch of audio. Okay. I want to thank everybody who's popped in to check this stream out and to tune into our discussion as we go through Green Tides and Clockwork Skies, which is the collaborative mini project setting, which is a steampunk / clockpunk themed region. One of many more to come in the future with multiple phases. However, before we go into further detail, allow me to properly introduce our lore masters for this evening. I'm going to go in the order that I have everybody from top left to bottom right. First and foremost, we have the fantastic, esteemed, sarcastic druid.
Thank you.
We have, next to sarcastic druid, the ever clever and ever fashionable, the elderberry.
Howdy do.
To the left of me here, we have the sparkly, the effervescent, James W.
What's up?
And then, over to the right, we have the awesome, the epic, the legendary Death Gauge.
The man, the myth, the legend, the beard.
The beard. 100%. So, in general, how this discussion is going to take place is I want each of you to kind of provide a general introduction about yourself, your bit of your creative background, a bit of your like world building or D&D or tabletop or writing background, whichever the case is. And we're going to volley back and forth between each other. Now the thing is that I really did wish I had a bot on my stream where I can have everybody roll initiative, but I'm just going to choose it at random, I think. And I'm actually going to pick on James W. You're going to be the first one to get us started here.
I knew it.
I absolutely love and adore your light up ears. That's a great, fantastic touch. I'm also somebody who knows about fashionable facial wear.
It's all about the accessories. You got to accessorize.
Absolutely. So please feel free to tell us a little bit about yourself, your creative background, how you came across Project Aurora. I mean, that story will be fairly similar to each other because that was mostly run through a TikTok campaign. However, you have the floor. Feel free to tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, my name is James. I have been a short story writer since I was probably like 16. Nothing published because I'm a coward. I have run a Shadowrun podcast for probably about 4.5 years or so. I do streaming at Riot House Entertainment. We haven't done anything in like a 1.5 years because, life stuff happens. I came across Project Aurora through TikTok. Thought that it would be pretty cool to kind of help somebody build a giant world where, maybe my ideas might actually get seen to fruition instead of just continuing to live in my head in unplayed campaigns.
Absolutely. Especially, having run, different tabletop settings and, over time, you do just have that mental archive library of just rogue notes of different ideas to implement, and stuff just does not weld into the active campaign, and it gets thrown over to the side. And so having that repertoire to tap into is always useful.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that I've used a fair amount of those notes that I do have in my current role. So it's been a really, really good creative experience, for sure.
Absolutely. Also, I didn't realize that you have a octopus behind you.
Oh yeah. It was made by a roommate that I had, Brooke Collins. If anybody
Nice.
wants to like look her up, she's really dope. Not really friends with her anymore, but I still like to shout out her art because like that thing's dope and I love it. It's been with me
Very
for about
good.
6 years.
Very good.
Nice.
Absolutely. So, if you, and as I'm going through this, if anybody has any particular, social that they want to promote, whether it's like a Twitch channel or a YouTube channel or an Instagram or Twitter or whatever, you could feel free to DM me and then I can post it in chat. And yeah. And so I'm going to Ellerberry.
Hey.
I'm gonna
How's it going?
choose you next. Yeah.
All right. My name is Jeff, and I've been into like acting and like creating with friends for basically since high school, which has been a while now. But done a couple different creative endeavors, like a couple different podcasts and stuff, writing skits and whatnot. And basically running campaigns for friends and creating the world from the ground up there. So basically just a lot of creation with nothing but wanting people to just have fun, hitting or being the big forefront for why I've been doing it.
Absolutely.
Saw this on TikTok, and I was like, you know what? I need a creative endeavor of some sort, and I need to put it out in some way. And I thought that this could be a really good and fun project to be a part of. So that's how I found it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely been, I know it's definitely been a journey for myself, being part of this project. And I should share with you that I originally came across it when Sensei Suplex rated me when I was in the midst of just starting out on Twitch and just kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do. And then it occurred to me that running Dungeons and Dragons on Twitch and sort of going that route was very fun and interesting. And I'm somebody who is of the sole belief that there are a lot of solo ventures out there, and there are everybody has that, like, you know, one world that they want to create and broadcast, but there's something unique about everybody sort of like getting together and pouring in those ideas. And we've also been learning a lot about the processes we've been going along too, because while it's been something that has been part of Project Aurora since the beginning, it was on sort of like a smaller scale than it is now. So I'm very excited to see where everything continues to go, and I'm very glad that we have a set setting so that we can start kicking these ideas in the high gear and start getting them down.
For sure.
And I'm gonna say Death Gauge.
Hi, how we doing? Name's Death Gauge, aka Death, aka John. Either one, doesn't matter. The story behind me getting into D&D in the first place is hilarious in and of itself. But I remember just scrolling through TikTok one day. I found Suplex on there, and I was sitting next to my girlfriend, and I was like, "Hey, check this out. This seems really cool to me. I don't really know. I'd like to get into it. You think it's like high class? You think I can like get in? I think I might be able to try it, you know." So I was like, "Oh, you know what? What's the worst he's gonna say? No." So I sent it in. I originally actually applied for a cartographer position.
Yeah, okay.
And he came back with me and said, "How about LOREMASTER?" And I was like, "All right, why not?"
Yeah.
And then I come to find out I actually I really enjoy it. My brother was telling me like not very long after, because I've always played D&D with my brother. He was like, well, yeah, I mean, why would you go for cartography? You're so much better at lore. And I was just like, looked at him sideways. Like, I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, everything that you've done in this game is all like coming back right now to bite us in the ass. I was like, I mean, you
That is
guys made
such
your
a
own
good
decisions.
feeling.
Yeah, it is.
That is
Yeah, well,
such
I
a
mean,
good
they made
feeling.
their own decisions. You know, you dig your own hole. And I was like, okay, well, maybe. And then I started. We got Elderberry there, and I got paired up on the last tasks, and
Yep.
we had a lot of fun with that. We
Yeah.
kicked that back and forth for days. We were hardly ever on calls. It was mostly just messaging. And we were always like tired because it was like the end of the day for me and the beginning of the day for him. It was so funny how it all happened. But I had a lot of fun doing it. So
Yeah,
Here we are.
absolutely. And we'll be deep diving into some of the details of that task soon enough. And I think at this point we will wrap things up with Sarcastic Druid.
Alrighty. So I'm Sarcastic Druid, also Rob. I got into D&D because a bunch of friends of mine in high school, one of them messaged me one day and he's like, hey, I'm starting a D&D group. Do you want to play? And I go, what the hell is that? And he's like, oh, you're going to love it. And so I ended up absolutely loving it. And it was a great experience that got me a lot of friends. And so I just jumped into it with everything I had. And I've always been a little bit of a writer. I have entire journals that I filled up with mini stories just throughout all of the years. And D&D, as I soon found out, was a perfect way to take all of these stories that are constantly circulating in my head and actually stick them somewhere and get to like mess with them and manipulate them a little bit. And so from there, I just kept playing it as much as I possibly could, finding new groups and actually starting DMing myself. And so it's been a little bit of a journey. And like the rest of you guys, I found Project Aurora on Twitch because I was using it as a main source of my D&D creativity.
Yep.
And I happened to scroll by, saw it, and like I wasn't for sure what he was talking about at first, but as I listened, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm spending the rest of my day. I got to make sure I get into this. And like Death Gauge was saying, I wasn't for sure whether I was going to, because there were a lot of questions, and I originally like wasn't for sure what to apply to. And I remember one of the questions for LOREMASTER that I applied to, and he's like, we need you to tell us some lore about a flying city. And I looked at my notes from my current campaign that were on my desk, and my crowning achievement was a flying city that my players were in. I'm like, you know, I might have a solid shot. And so here we are.
Awesome. Okay, so there was definitely some material there to work with already from the get-go.
Yes.
Floating city? What?
Floating cities. Nah, we don't do
say.
anything like that in Project Aurora.
No floating cities. No.
Nah.
Floating City.
Absolutely. So thanks everybody for doing just brief introductions. So for those of you who tune in either now or as part of a VOD in the future, essentially what we are discussing, what we are talking about is a particular project within a project. The overall community is what is known as Project Aurora. If you're curious about it, of course, it is run mainly through a Discord. High level, what Project Aurora is a living universe Dungeons and Dragons community with multiple DMs, multiple campaigns, many more players in one universe where those things take place in. As of recently, there has been this need to create a brand new setting and to in a way press the restart button. To really, working off of all of the things that have succeeded in the past and starting anew and creating a new setting with new rules, new story beats, new opportunities for dungeon masters, lore masters, and homebrew people, cartographers, artists, musicians to pitch in. And it is a volunteer effort with various individuals putting in bits and pieces of their own ideas in order to make something greater. And the setting that we have settled on over the course of many weeks of deliberation, of ideation, of voting, and workshopping is what is known as Green Tides and Clockwork Skies. The short version is the surface of the territory, of the region where this is taking place in. That surface has been taken over and dominated by nature, by a force of Fae. And humanoids have been forced to take to the skies in a floating clockwork city, or multiple, as there's probably the opportunity for there to be multiple smaller settlements. We've been discussing a little bit more and more about the details, but one big part of this world is the creation of what is known as the Clockwork Titan. There have been so far recent pieces of art that have depicted this Clockwork Titan as a ginormous dragon, like mechanical dragon, and it looks amazing. And I would like to actually get the opportunity to show. I'm gonna switch over to the other screen I have up. Okay, there we are. This is the current Project Aurora mini project World Anvil, and I do believe, oh, there's everybody right there. Here we are. This was drawn up by the amazing Finn, who is a fantastic artist, and there has been improvement upon this design already, but as a starting concept for this Clockwork Titan, it is quite epic, quite amazing, and there are all sorts of things to kind of put onto this, to put into this setting, to put onto this Clockwork Titan, and to, you know, come up with the backstory of this entire setting that we've been working on. So from taking very broad strokes, then, regardless, well, I should put aside the fact that we are discussing about this in particular, but I should clarify that this mini project is comprised of dungeon masters, such as myself, but also lore masters. And the point of a lore master is to be essentially the individuals that do a lot of the storytelling, lore-based heavy lifting when it comes to like the history, the history, the races, the social, how society looks, how the surface generally looks, just generally everything that is background lore, or even foreground lore, with this setting and beyond. And so, I know that each of you have had, at one point or another, Max Fish, who's the lore master lead, has assigned particular tasks to each of you, and actually 2 and 2 have been paired up to those very specific tasks, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. But from very broad strokes, at the very point that we, kind of singled in on this idea of green tides and clockwork skies, what were the big rocks going through your head? Not like when I say big rocks, I mean big ideas. I don't literally mean big rocks going through your head. We're not that violent around here. Unless you're a player in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, then anything goes. But generally speaking, what are the big evocative ideas? What are the big things you typically think of when you think of a setting like this? And I'm going to go in reverse order. We're going to say Sarcastic Druid.
Right. So when I helped first create kind of the some of the setting, when DMs and lore masters were throwing ideas back and forth with each other, when Green Tides was said, it initially brought to mind like a landscape with a sort of kind of dust storm going over it, except instead of dust, I pictured like vines and vegetation growing fast and like covering the land in this
Right.
sort of sweltering blanket. And then like I pictured clouds that were actually made of gears and that kind of thing, just
Oh,
creating the broad strokes.
Nice.
Yeah. It's because the key thing is with, you know, if you take something like this that completely removes any chance to have like a normal Dungeons and Dragons setting, basically the sky is the limit. That's a pun.
I like it.
You could have clouds that are not just water vapor. You could have flying machines that just wouldn't work in real life because it is a fantasy setting, and we want big ideas, and you know, we want to work off of badass points and the rule of cool, and that's entirely what we're trying to encapsulate here. We're also trying to make sure that, you know, those ideas are set in stone, and that, you know, there's idea confirmation and is written down solidly, so that there's something consistent to work off of as things are building on. But I'm doing a lot of this, and I'm gonna switch it over to Death Gauge over there in the corner. Oh, hello.
Hello. Yeah, sorry, my cat is trying to steal your thunder on the stream.
Totally cool,
He's
because
they're
probably gonna do that
adorable.
about 100 more
Yeah.
times.
cats are fantastic.
Yeah, is he fantastic? Because his name is Lucifer, so.
Yeah.
Well, I want
Is
you to know,
Lucifer a
I
cat?
love
Then the answer
Lucifer,
is
and he
yes.
can do no wrong.
He does all the wrong, buddy. All the wrong. I promise. So if you want to hear more about like what we're doing currently, or more about what we did in the past, I was kind of fighting with him the whole time. So.
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Your general first, I guess what I'm asking is your general, like, what are your first big impressions of a setting like Green Tides and Clockwork Skies? This is before we talk about the tasks and any of the lore that has been built. What are the big things that come to your mind immediately?
So, the first and foremost, I will say, I will admit, I am not a fan of like steampunk
Okay.
or anything like, and you know, clock punk, whatever it is, all of that stuff. Just not my style.
Sure.
I'm high fantasy and medieval. That's kind of the way I am.
Mhm.
So when I saw that the vote went to that, I was like, oh, yay. But then, you know, I realized that there's like this, you know, an arcane element to it.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, all right, I can work with that. And then when I realized what we were tasked with, Jeff and I,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh yeah, I can definitely work with that. Well, let's go. So it's not you know, wouldn't be my first choice of a setting to take, but I'm not mad about it. I'll say that.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think one of the big things we were trying to do, you know, when coming up with the final setting was like, hey, you know, all of these other ideas we had, why don't we put those into, because those are all important. Everybody's put in some effort to make sure that those ideas are out there, and we want to represent them in some way. And I definitely am 100% with the idea that it's not all technological, that there is this magitech or magipunk, or just magic in general, that there is high fantasy elements going on. And
Right.
that is not to say that a cornering or nearby region next to this one wouldn't be more high fantasy, or there wouldn't be more individuals coming from another. Oh, my throat. Sorry.
Hydrate,
Yeah,
hydrate,
there's-
hydrate.
Oh, sounds to me
Everybody-
like we got to
everybody
use
drink.
the chat
Everybody,
for some channel points to
There we
hydrate
go.
our illustrious host.
Anyways,
pop one for Ukraine.
I appreciate it. But yeah, there's it's important to still provide the opportunities for everybody to kind of work within their passions, right?
Right.
And we want to still do that. And so totally appreciate and still want to, do magic, still want to have more of the, traditional D&D storytelling as part of that setting as well. And then Elderberry.
Hey, so what happened with me when I started really thinking about this is I really started focusing. Fae are one of my favorite, just like creatures and just like societies to really work with. And I started wondering, what was the catalyst? What was the real reason that the Fae are doing this? Why do they want this area back so much? And that is something that has been like rattling around in my head, just like a freaking BB, just like ting 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 ting, and all of the extra space that I have in there. So
Yeah.
it's taking up a lot of like thought of what exactly is this, and then going into wondering like what are like the societal norms of both of these societies, and just like wanting to really like get to hitting all of that stuff. That was like the big intrigue for me, was trying to find the gray area and also trying to find like the reason.
Right. And I think that that is a really important part, because usually when coming up with the like the setting and the pieces, you have to kind of just sit and think, why though? Why
This is all very cool, but
Yeah.
why?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But why?
And there are, there are some like overarching themes, right? There are pieces of the whole, civilization versus nature paradigm that sort of speaks for itself a little bit. But then the thing is that I think we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but I think we kind of determined that the Fae side of it is its own civilization. Yeah. So it's almost imperialist versus imperialist, rather than just nature taking back the surface. So that is definitely a big question, I think is important to kind of unravel as we go through this process too. Last but not least, James W.
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest. I've been listening to everybody, but I don't know that I actually heard what the actual question was.
The actual question is literally, aside from your specific tasks, when you think of Green Tides and Clockwork Skies, what are the big things that come to your mind? What are the big impressions that you have?
So the first impression that I had upon hearing the name itself, I just imagined like a kind of different semi-clockwork, but mostly modern world, with like zeppelins flying in the air and like airships that really make no sense how they actually work. Kind of similar to the Eberron stuff. I kind of imagined like that level of world, and then taking an entire city, ground and all, and just like raising it into the sky, a la Avengers. And that's kind of how I imagined like this like city that we were talking about. And I was like, you know what, I'm kind of with Death Gauge. I really don't like steampunk much. Okay. I obviously like Shadowrun. I'm into like cyberpunk and all that kind of stuff. I'm really, really into sci-fi, and that's kind of where my wheelhouse is. But the idea of coming up, especially with like the automatons, like those are a big factor to me in my vision of it, is just seeing random like robots effectively walking around the streets. And like that's really what kind of like kicked up my passion for the project, really, and kind of gave me a toe into it to gain interest, was the fact of like building these effectively like Warforged that I loved so much from the Eberron setting.
Yeah.
And kind of refining them to be what I believe to be cooler.
Hell yeah. And there's
Mine's much better.
I I love the fact that there's, you know, a little bit of like cyberpunk, like, or no, like taking little things from cyberpunk and little things from Shadowrun, which honestly I've never successfully run a like Shadowrun 5th or 6th edition game. It is a chunky game, but the setting is amazing. Like the lore behind that entire world is effing fantastic.
Well, have you tried Anarchy?
I was thinking about doing Anarchy. I know Anarchy is a little slimmer compared to the full game. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, if you're wanting to take a lot of the crunch out of it, it's a great thing. Not to get off topic.
Yeah. That is okay. So, let's actually start talking about some of the specific tasks that y'all have been assigned. Now, if I go back really quick here to the LoreMaster announcements, if we're going back a little bit when we were talking about previous assignment, Death Gauge and Elderberry, at that time, both of you were kind of in the bin of fleshing out the elemental entities, how they worked, how the religion behind them worked, because that is an important part about the divinity of this region. And then, of course, we had Sarcastic Druid and James W., and both of you were tasked with fleshing out playable races. Particularly, I don't remember exactly where it landed, but I know kind of figuring out 3 homebrew race ideas and finalizing them, or finalizing them, fleshing them out, because when we were, all together figuring out what, races are in the setting, we sort of took a bunch of the vanilla races to the chopping block, and we're like, no.
Yes.
And decided to sub them in with some of these homebrew race ideas. And so these are 2 different areas of lore building, and I don't necessarily want to have one waiting before the other. So, well, not necessarily. So what I'm going to suggest is I'm going to literally flip a coin. No, maybe not literally flip a coin, but I'll do like a D6 and do it high to low. We'll see which one.
Bust.
Right. And then we'll figure out which one we start, talking about first. And obviously the individuals who were, central to that can really start talking about what the process was, and then how you came to the what it looks like today, and also talk about if you feel like there are any opportunities to polish or add to it, because we could certainly do that during the session, or if not during this session, in the near future. But yeah, just an opportunity to showcase some of your work. So I'm literally gonna do a roll 1d6, and I'm gonna say fleshing out the elemental entities will be high, and the flesh out playable races and the 3 homebrew race ideas will be low. So I don't have an actual thing to show up here. 3, so that's low.
Whoa.
So we're gonna talk about the right now. We're gonna talk about the playable races, but more specifically the 3 homebrew races. So I'll start off by sort of just letting Sarcastic Druid and James W take the helm here and sort of start talking about what they are, what the process was, and from there. And then after just a little bit of that, anybody can just chime in and talk about it, and then I'll just referee.
All right,
hey, Druid, how about you start with the Caesarians?
Absolutely. So when we came to making the 3 homebrew races, both James and I kind of came in with our our set idea that we were working on, and then we came together to make the third one. But the one that I came into the mix with was what became the Circeans, and it was a combination of a harpy and a siren. An idea that I had just because these are two of my favorite like mythical creatures to kind of think about and to kind of write into the stories that I make. And so I thought it would be a really interesting combo to make a playable race that is a hybrid of both. And so we started fleshing it out, trying to make sure that it seemed like a hybrid of the two races, but still kept calling cards of both.
Yeah.
And so what we eventually got was a very inhumanly beautiful creature with very kind of strong leathery wings that also sometimes resembled like bat wings or raven wings. And this was characteristic of their harpy nature, while their beauty and their siren's calling or their siren's call ability shows their siren nature. And so it was a really interesting journey to see how we created this race and how we created the background for them of like sirens losing their habitat and being taken in by harpies and shown how to survive amongst the skies. And when these two species came together, you get this entirely new result.
Yeah, and it was a whole lot of fun. I mean, trying to come up with something completely new, and like, admittedly, yeah, there was elements of these two monstrous races that we incorporated it, but the idea of trying to come up with something that was fresh, unique, and like interesting enough for people to actually want to play, was one of the things that I kind of felt like was going to be one of our bigger challenges. But luckily. Was it Max that put us together? Or did we just randomly just be like, hey, I want to work on races, and so do I?
Yeah, I think we both kind of mentioned that we wanted to work on races at the same time, and Max Fish, seeing the opportunity, goes, all right, we got to figure it out.
Sounds like it's y'all then.
Yeah.
But yeah, and luckily because of that, I mean, Druid and I really work really well together, and like the way that the ideas flow between the two of us is extremely comfortable. So it was a lot of fun to try and figure out what we wanted to keep from the harpies, what we wanted to keep from the sirens, and if we wanted to have them like have something that's like completely unique about them. And I feel like we did a pretty good job, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we came up with something that has an entirely new feel to it. It took both A and B, and we created something entirely new.
Yeah, it was a whole lot of fun. And I know that so my race that I came to, we were talking about with Sensei, who's the main head of the project, as it were.
The grand poobah, as it were.
The big cheese.
Yeah.
I had mentioned he had mentioned something about that. He really wanted something alien, just like completely foreign to like any kind of like human experience or anything like that. So immediately, being the sci-fi guy that I am, my mind went to Star Wars. And I was like, what are some cool like creatures that we can incorporate from something like that, but make it to where it kind of fits the theme of the story. Somebody else had mentioned that about like psionics and like telepathy and all that kind of stuff. So my first thought was the Ang-T from Star Wars. Mm-hmm. They have like some really cool like they look like just a pile of rocks that just kind of move around, which was really intriguing to me, and to me kind of felt alien but still natural. And then throughout, just kind of going back and forth with Druid and all that, we actually came up with the idea that they're actually a sentient mushroom race that uses their own vines and like natural things to like connect these rocks to create effectively a body around their central thought process center. And I kind of just used, admittedly, I know I was supposed to be going for aliens here, but I did kind of use like what the human body is to the brain, because when we all think about it, we're just a bone mech with meat armor that's protecting the pilot that's up here. So I kind of just wanted to kind of incorporate that, and then now we have the High Fades, which are a sentient mushroom race who uses teleportation to kind of move around a little bit, which is how they move their like rocks and such. I kind of took a little bit off of some of the mushroom races that I've seen in other settings, but I kind of wanted to incorporate more of like quote unquote real-ish type things. So we created like a communication network that we called what did we call that? Mycelium network, something like that.
Yep. Yeah, the collective.
Yeah, and which shorthand was the collective knowledge that this entire community basically has a database of all of the knowledges of everyone in their community that they can pull from at any kind of given time.
So does that include anybody they've ever encountered in the past?
Yes and no.
Kind of.
So it's not necessarily a like a hive mind where it would be actually kind of creepy if one of these individuals showed up and then looked at you and said, "Hello, Druid," you know, and like just like knew who you were. It's like elderberry.
And
So
we know it's like we know who you are.
We know you.
right? So
We
so
watch you
in a
while you're
way,
sleeping.
that is possible if somebody from that community has met elderberry before. Then
if they've watched me sleeping.
yeah, exactly. Nothing weird or anything.
Yeah.
Who doesn't watch their friends sleep?
Yeah.
You know.
See,
like
and if
that.
you're not using that face, then are you really friends? But yeah, it's like, let's say that like a high fade from this community had met elderberry before, and the one that he's meeting today is just pops in, looks into the collective, is like, yes, you're elderberry, a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, so and so met you once. Like that's kind of the extent that they can do that.
It's a
just
hive
because
mind
they
with
can.
individuality, basically.
Yes,
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
is the central component.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we wanted to make sure that, like, while yes, there is like the hive mind aspect, we didn't want them to be essentially just one giant entity with little feelers.
Right.
Right.
Do they tap into that like voluntarily? Do they like, oh, one moment? Oh,
Yeah. So
okay.
the way that we've kind of balanced that a little bit, which
so they're more like
our-
G-men and less like a hive mind.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm getting something from base HQ.
kind of, yeah. Yeah.
That's the guy. Get him.
Well, and one of the things that we were really worried about while we were making it was what's going to stop somebody from just accessing the collective knowledge of every high fade that has ever existed at any point in time. So we kind of made it to where the further you are from the colony, the harder it is to access the information, and each individual colony of high fades has their own individual collective that they can access at any time. Other people can be invited in, but that is very, very, very not necessarily taboo, but you got to be a real good friend of that community to be allowed into their brain effectively.
It's an extensive application.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
This is actually like something very interesting because like one of the largest organisms on Earth is actually a fungus down below the Earth's crust, where it actually wraps around the whole Earth. So
I love it when people know the thing that I've read once.
yeah. So that's actually like if you were tapping into that, like I think that would make even more sense. Like that's how they actually communicate with each other. Is there is an organism that is like within at least the whole region where they can just like touch it and be able to talk to each other or something like that. They just need to like maybe dig down into it to be able to connect to that hive mind.
Yeah, to kind of like connect to the switchboard that could actually connect them to their community. Ooh, that's a good idea. Write that down, Drew.
Dang it, Jeff, don't give them ideas.
Yeah,
sorry. We're not a team.
And see,
No good things for you.
That's the part that really makes it interesting as we were kind of fleshing out and developing it further, is that like in order to keep it playable and not too OP, you know, we separate them into collectives and everything. But then we were trying to decide certain aspects of their culture and everything and give them more of that individual feel. And we were thinking like, what if like what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And speaking of taboo, what happens if a high fade individual does something that the community and the collective doesn't approve of? And so we came up with this amazing concept that I love, just called the burned ones, or burning. And this is a process where a high fade has committed a crime or a transgression that is seen as unforgivable to its community. And so what it does is that the community, both literally and figuratively, burns that individual away from the collective, so that they no longer have this undercurrent of access to the collective's information. They are cut off. They're still retaining their individuality and their own experiences, but in essence, that part of them is being burned out of their system. And it was just a really interesting concept to play with.
Yeah, and the idea of like them being able, like having this whole community-based system, and then the idea of like you have to do something incredibly heinous to be a burned one. But the idea that we were thinking was like, well, what happens if a high fae just decides, well, I'm gonna go like join up with the fae and like try to like destroy everything that I can that is not one of us. Well, like what's to stop them from just like invading the collective and all that? It was like, well, we've got to figure out a way to cut them off from that. So that's where we came up with the burned ones idea.
Yeah,
which
Like it's like they changed their frequency or something.
Yeah, it's like, I'm
like,
definitely.
just-
Oh no, I'll let you finish.
Oh, that was basically what I was thinking, is just like changing the frequency, turning the knob down, or their knob inside them where they cannot tune into the same channel anymore. Like you're gone. Get out of your burn book.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And we had thought about it effectively as just kind of like, and like you were saying, like turning a knob, like we're just burning that knob away.
Yeah.
Like you get no access at all anymore.
Your antenna's gone, my guy.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm definitely getting vibes of like the blue people from Pandora, or like the Protons.
Yes.
This kind of like that. That definitely sounds like a really interesting aspect, and that definitely is something that would defend against outside psychic intrusion. I want to move on to the third one, and then once we discuss that third one, we can visit in with Elderberry and Death Gauge on
Sounds great.
their task.
So the third one is called the Proto Titans. And as you've sort of explained already, Matt, the main titan of the humanoid races is this massive clockwork dragon. And so we were toying around with that, trying to think of an idea for a third race. And we decided that, being the technological masters that they are, both humans and dwarves were creating like prototypes of this before they really thought of the idea to create the Titan. And during the process of creating these prototypes, some of these individuals began to have sentience. And this
Father, do I
was
have a soul?
Exactly. And they were greeted with open arms and allowed to basically develop as they saw fit. And so doing that, you bring into existence the Proto-Titans that take several forms, whether it be that of a dragon or a mechanical version of another similar race. And so there are these groups of sentient automatons that are trying to find their own purpose in the world and navigating all of these new sensations. And so we use that to kind of make them feel unique and to kind of get away from the whole, I guess, just robot stereotype. Right. We made them have the ability to have cores, and the core is the essence of their own design. And cores can be made out of anything from different types of wood to different types of metal. And within a certain degree, a core decides essentially how that prototype lives its life. Now, the great thing about that is, because they are clockwork and mechanical, they can switch out certain parts of their own body, of their own being, as long as it matches the core, to kind of mix and match how they see fit. Sort of this modular build that allows them to really express their own creativity and individuality.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and one of the things that we really wanted to explore with this race specifically was the ability to change your character through modulation versus just through standard character build and leveling and all of that. Because we have like different cores, like the wooden cores and the metal cores are specifically designed for something based on what core they're using. But we wanted to give a player the option where it's like, if I wanted to be we'll say a steel core proto titan that was like designed initially for war, but like I don't want to be a warrior. I want to be a bard. I want to be a rogue or something like that. Then they could modulate themselves with wooden parts that may or may not.
And that's the last time we're gonna talk about it. Yeah.
Right?
No, Daddy.
Get out of here, Dad.
And we wanted to make it to where like people had those options to be able to like modulate themselves and kind of, and that might be a little bit of my like cyberpunk part coming in there. So we thought that would be like a pretty cool way to do that, which is part of the reason why the Proto Titans in our notes have the least amount, because they are far and away the youngest race.
Yes. Even younger than the High Fates.
So I have a question about like, especially like, if we're going to go into like wood, like if it's wood, does it come down to the specific wood that you're using? Like, say you're using like iron oak or something like that, or you're using yew, or you're using birch or something. Is it that specific, or is it just like wood and then metal?
So with that one, there's kind of in order to kind of keep it easy for us and also still allow the lore to mesh, we kind of have it on a spectrum. Wooden parts tend to work pretty well across the board with a wooden core. Granted, you may have slight inconsistencies depending on what kind of wood matches with what kind of wood. And so it doesn't necessarily matter what kind of wood that you start with your core. You have that spectrum to kind of travel along as you please. And like we said earlier, with like the steel and wood cores, you can mix and match. But when the material differs as majorly as it does between wood and metal, you'll run into the problem that it may not take.
Okay. Okay.
Gotcha. So I'm hoping.
And
oh yeah.
I was going to say
your piece. Sorry.
We're kind of hoping that the homebrew team might be able to pick up a little bit of the slack on that.
And that they don't hate us.
I think this would be definitely one of those opportunities to proactively go to the homebrew team and try to kind of give them the outline and help them do that, because there's definitely a lot of customization with this race I'm noticing. One other thing that I want to mention, and I know that there was, I don't know which one of you was part of this discussion or this chat. There's a lot of chats and discussions that happen, and a lot of it doesn't get written down, which is a problem. But the discussion had to sort of do with what other ways to represent, in this case, prototype Titans, but generally mechanical races like the Warforged, how to represent them without automatically going to the I am a robot. Right. And you've explained a lot of that, because a lot of it has to do with their core and like their they have a loadout when you kind of think of it, when it comes to like what pieces and what arms they have and stuff like that. There was also a mention or a thought about perhaps the Proto-Titans, or maybe some of the Proto-Titans, gain their sentience from volunteer humanoids who would rather not, like their rights. So individuals who maybe they're sick, or maybe they want a better life for themselves, and they think being a proto-titan will gain them certain abilities and certain, at that point you're going into like transhumanism areas. But I think it would be,
which we at this house stand. Let's do it.
Yeah. So like, I don't remember who was part of that discussion, but
I was.
Yes, you were a part of that discussion. Is that something that's sort of incorporated into some of the stuff that you've mentioned about the core, or is that like an added maybe it's like a, you know how elves have, you know, dark elves, wood elves, high elves. Perhaps
Right.
that is a variant of the Proto-Titan, or
Right.
is that the source of their consciousness? Because it seems like the source of the consciousness is based upon their configuration, based upon their core. Is that correct?
So with that entire thing, that was not initially a thought I had considered. I would consider that to be a variant. To be honest, I like to keep that separate from like gaining sentience instead of implanting it. I think it would be a really cool idea, but it was not what we originally went with.
Sure.
And so like it wasn't part of the idea that came into the core. The core
Okay,
was mostly just like the heart of the machine in a way. But
Okay.
I can see easily both ideas.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I know that with me, like whenever I was thinking of the cores, the way that I was viewing that was like your core superstructure effectively is made of this material. So kind of like your bones, effectively. It has wooden bones, but like metal skin, or metal bones and like wooden parts, that sort of thing.
Oh, gotcha.
Was how I always was how I was always viewing it.
Okay.
But I am not going to lie. The idea of like gaining sentience, becoming a proto-titan, like I've already got a thing we could do. Nature magic heartwood, and the specific wood is the only thing you can put the soul of a person into. Boom, that's the implant. That would be fun. Anyway,
It would
sorry.
raise a lot of questions
Really
between
would.
like how they would interact, because if it were a sub race, then you would see those who had, I guess, as funny, as ironic as a word it is to use, organically achieve sentience, versus those that had it implanted and were not originally part of that race. So while it would be a great idea, it would
Yeah.
also be equally great to see how those two interacted with each other.
For sure.
Sure.
For sure.
And some of that is, I would say some of that is probably represented by the fact that variants have different ability score increases and stuff. So something that maybe represents a more humanoid sentimentality. I would say overall that transhumanist idea, a lot of humanity is lost. A significant amount is lost, probably.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But yeah.
They do stuff like that with Shadowrun, so there's absolutely ways that you could do that. Where it's like if you become that, then like you start becoming less empathetic. Yeah, no, like that's a great idea, Druid. We need to talk about that next time we
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm writing it down.
I have the notes for that here, so no need to worry about that.
Good deal.
Absolutely. So thank you, James W. and Sarcastic Druid, for giving us the deep dive of the homebrew races. And like all of these homebrew races are like, mwah, like that's a delicious sauce. They're all fantastic, and I'm very interested in, as a DM, creating NPCs, but also seeing what the players come up with. When we get those into like the homebrew stats phase, which I don't think is going to be that hard, because usually races have like just a certain set of things that are constant, and they don't necessarily change. But I think Proto-Titans might have a little bit more because there's more modularity. Anyways, I digress. We're going to pivot over to Elderberry and Deathgauge for this next section, and we are going to be discussing their previous fleshing out of specifically the divinity of this region, specifically the elemental entities. It was decided that instead of making, falling into the typical idea of just having either a monotheistic deity or having, your traditional fantasy pantheon, that it would be centered upon the elements and the main entities behind those elements. So feel free to kick it off and tell us a little bit about the process of coming up with that, what you came up with, and just kind of free floating and talking about things to either not necessarily improve because they're amazing the way they are, but more in the sense of if there's anything that we feel like polishing or just generally talking about, right?
Yeah, of course. You want to go first?
Those goes.
Okay. You beat me to it.
Yeah.
So we had what we ended up doing is kind of a lot of the time divinity cannot be really changed by the players, and why not have your the aspects of the divine be able to be touched and be able to be killed by your players, where your players can actually really start moving all of these things around. There are 5 domains of elements. We have the traditional earth, wind, water, and fire. Sorry. But then we also added arcane into the mix as well. All of these, they struggle to have a consistent balance, and that's what makes the world go round. And inside those are the elemental entities known as the aspects. The aspects act as the divine powers of this. But the divine powers cannot grow, or the aspects cannot grow without the belief of the mortals to be able to grow in their power. More people that believe in them, the more powerful they become. So every region can have different dominant aspects within them. So that's basically kind of like the meat and the potatoes of the thought process for what that was going to be.
Right. So one of the things that I like tried to definitely keep in my mind mostly was he talked about balance, and I had to constantly keep in my brain that I want it the way that I want to write it, as I want to keep it in like sort of a yin yang type of a flow. So everything there was always some kind of a kickback. Like if I wrote this, there was a kickback that came after it, and that went to the next one, and so on and so forth. And so when I came around to writing arcane, because we divvied it up to he did these 2 or 3, whatever it was, and I did these 2 or 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
And he sucker punched me into getting arcane. So thanks, Jeff. But
You're welcome.
I actually enjoyed it because I thought about this idea that the elements in and of themselves, even really in the real world, you can imagine are something sort of like a magical kind of a thing. And that all kind of centers around the idea of arcane. So one of the things that I came up with and I tossed over as an idea to him is, I was like, well, why don't we make it to where it's kind of like everything is almost in a web, or maybe like strings or something like that. And this excess energy between them, because of this imbalance of like this side is more powerful than this side or whatever, has this like runoff, and all of it drips down, and that's what creates arcane, because it's the mixture of possibility and chaos.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
I had a lot of fun doing that. That was a lot of fun for me.
Awesome. I'm sort of fascinated with arcane because we're prone to understand earth, wind, water, fire, because they're things that we can like, water.
Tangibly see.
Arcane is very intangible. It's sort of by the way that you describe it, it's sort of like there's almost leaks in the veil that you tangle with these strings or this web in order to create in order to manifest certain effects. And I know like there's between earth, wind, water, and fire, there is sort of that relationship between how one's relationship is with another. What would you say in terms of like arcane? What is arcane's relationship with the others?
it's more there to potentially build them up or break them down.
Okay.
It is more what arcane is. It's the cat.
Yeah, it's like a byproduct.
Yes.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
It's a byproduct or a catalyst. It can be what it wants to be. Like you think that but let's see. I'm trying to think of like
I'm sort of thinking
It
like
comes-
creation and entropy are kind of like forces that
Yeah.
are kind of a universal thing, and they're arcane forces when you kind of think about it.
yeah, and like gravity. Like think of the things that you can't really like necessarily explain that don't really fit into like probability.
Right.
Probability you can't put into in an element usually, but you can in arcane. Mathematics, things
Right.
like that. The sciences, that's all kind of theory and all of that. That kind of stuff comes into arcane. It is what the thought was more.
Gotcha. If Einstein was a mage in this setting, they would be an arcane mage,
Yes,
essentially. Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The smarty guys.
The
Mhm.
smarty guys. The
The thinking-
Mordenkainens. Yeah.
The thinky
Yeah.
There you go.
doo-doos. Yeah.
The guy who does big brain.
Yeah.
But like with all of the aspects are named after different traits that like all of the elements have, and you can see that it becomes a little bit more esoteric when you jump into arcane. Like the traits that end up going into there definitely have like more of an esoteric feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, arcane has like chaos, control, possibility, and potential in theory, while like your traditional like fire stuff is like, oh yeah, I'm going to cleanse, I'm going to purify, rebirth, stuff like that.
Gotcha. And so, for instance, what's really good is that we, all of this stuff we have this stuff kind of built up and polished in the World Anvil. And as we're going along here, I'm sort of showing off the World Anvil. A lot of this stuff is either published or it has been recently polished over, so I can view it. But for instance, when it comes to these these elements, what's the history like there? Have these elements has the worship of these different elements or the following of these different elemental entities changed over time, or are they ancient throughout the eras? Are these different elemental entities are they in union with one another, or are they consistently at war with one another, or is it sort of like a Mount Olympus situation where they're just petty at each other, and they might get along or they might not?
I think that
It's complicated.
Yeah, I think that really comes down how we have it really within the regions is where you find like your battles, like how we have for dominant aspects in a region. There's a light and a dark dominant aspect, or a positive and a negative dominant aspect per each element. So there's about 10 there's going to be 10 aspects usually that would be in power within a region, and those can change. Those can also be the same, or they might have the same trait as a name, but they would be different in how they would come across because they are fed by their followers at that point. So that means that like all of these different aspects have their own personalities. So they might like the other ones, they might not. They could be in battle, they could work in tandem with each other, even if they are light and dark. So it is a very, very kind of like it is almost like a Mount Olympus type thing.
Yeah.
Really depending on the region as well.
I like that a lot because it really does exemplify or quantify the positive and negative aspects of both. Like if you want to be, if you're on the positive side, if you're a domain of fire, you are passionate. You are somebody who is very engrossed in the things that they believed in. And on the other, you flip on the other side, very very destructive, not quiet with their rage, right? And then you have other elements. Let's say if we're looking at water, on the positive side, cleansing, cleansing, calming, healing, things are generally beneficial for state of mind. And then the other side of it is consumption, which he says here, extremely manipulative, very cold and calculating, in that regard, like ice, water.
Yeah.
And I guess the next question is, as I understand it, and once again, it's because there's been a bunch of discussions and I don't remember what the exactness is, but there's some thought or discussion about how, not their interaction with each other, but is there some way in the setting where more than one of these domains mingle with each other in some way, shape, or form? I know that there was a talk about like twin something
Specs.
Twin specs, yeah. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So like with a twin aspect, like you could say that they're fighting for dominance if you really want to. Oh yeah, this happened like late last couple nights ago. I remember this conversation now. Yeah. So the dominant, or like if you said that you had purification for water and you had purification for fire, you could say that they either, depending on how you want to have the dichotomy of like how it all works together, you could say within the region, like they really do work together, like fire and water, that you'd think that they would fight against each other, but they want to purify. So water or fire can't purify water, or those elements that it can't really touch that well.
Right.
But water could. So they could be working in tandem to make sure that they are clearing the whole land, because they are still dominant within their aspect. But
which is where the yin and yang part comes in.
Yeah.
Because it's always kind of trying to maintain that balance.
Mm-hmm. And like you can't have. I kind of like to think of it as possibly like if any aspect grows in power, their opposite also grows in power. So even if they don't know them, and if one grows, the other one grows as well. So it always keeps it a little even.
Right.
Gotcha. So mechanically, is that like I guess it'd be nice to think of ways, you probably already figured out ways how that may be represented mechanically with an individual. Let's say, for example, let's just take let's cross both the streams here, and let's say we have a am I pronouncing it right? High fade.
High fade.
High fade.
Yep.
Let's say we had a high fade cleric. And so let's, I mean, in this complex, cleric automatically reminds me of like domain of water, the cleansing aspect. But twin spec between, let's say, water and arcane, what would, like, taking an example like that, how would that manifest itself? How does the twin spec appear in like a character or in a belief or in a part of the living lore? Like how does it manifest?
So I think that this is kind of the interesting thing that hasn't really been talked about that much with the aspects themselves, is that they start out as like just potential or just like tiny little sprites that honestly a player could be following that, and they could bring in their aspect to be in the running in any area. So if they did that, if they were to, and if they were following two different aspects of the same thing, like if they wanted to be like cleansing, they had two sprite aspects of cleansing from the water domain and the fire domain, or the arcane domain. It kind of gives them that ability to kind of mix and mash how they would want to kind of give that flavor however they would like.
Okay, so if I'm a caster, I'm not pigeonholed as a fire aspect. I can my nature as a caster is that I'm learned of these aspects, that I have knowledge. Let's say if I'm a wizard, I have equal knowledge of each of these aspects. But of course, if I chose like evocation, I might prefer to do more fire aspect, and that might be determined by my nature, or that might kind of determine my nature a little bit. Or let's say if I was a cleric, I could basically be somebody who's a little bit more brainy on top of being somebody who is a healer. So cleansing from water aspect, and these are basic customization options for characters, and they can pull. It's not like they're nobody's pigeonholed anywhere. Is kind of my thought process. Yeah, and
they don't need to fully follow. I'm sorry, I think I just cut off.
No,
go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
They don't need to really follow like the lead aspects. It's the belief in those aspects, even in the back of your mind, that grows them to dominancy. That's why destruction in a place that is like torn by war is so huge. A place why passion is so big right now, because people are growing and they are fervent about their causes. Why possibility is so big, because you're creating a titan, and the possibility of taking over the whole world or the whole region with the forest is a huge possibility. It's fed by everybody. That's why they're all there, and that's why these aspects have become dominant. So that's the big thing. Like, that's the reason why they're so big at this point. That's why growth and reclamation for Earth are the two dominant ones as well. Like, it's all fed by what's going on within the region.
Hell yeah.
So something that's actually kind of something that I had thought about. Your actual question, Matt, was the way that I had thought about it, and it's kind of just an idea I kicked around in the back of my brain, but and I'm sure this is going to end up, if it even goes anywhere, I'm sure it'll end up in the homebrew team's hands. But I feel like if there's somebody like a cleric in that sort of situation, whichever it is that they follow or they have more faith in, that those certain sorts of spells and such like that, they would get some kind of a little extra boost to. Even if it comes down to like a damage die or something like that. Like I said, this can probably end up in the homebrew team's hands, but
sure.
Either way, it's just something I had thought about as an extra kick to that whole area of it.
Yeah.
Mechanically.
Yeah, and I think finding a way to bring that into the classes and some of the class decisions might be a good idea for sure. This question for Sarcastic Druid and James W. If you had to create a character that was you know, that had these aspects, what sort of how would you go about it, and what would that character look like?
So for
Just-
that one, I have thought about that since it came about. Especially with like the aspects and everything, because when you really start to think about it with how we've laid it out, there's just so much room for possibility and for different kinds of characters. And so my answer to that is that I would take one of the new races that we've made, which I'm going to use one of the new names for them actually right now for the first time, the Amasai. That, yeah, they are essentially a combination of ASMR and Genasi.
Oh yeah,
that exists in this realm.
There was the talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I would, when creating the character, I would definitely use them because I love the way that they are incarnate of their aspect and their force that they are born from, and I love the roleplay possibility of having their guide be an aspect, and that aspect just influencing exactly how they play through, and just the idea makes me so happy to think about.
Yeah.
Well, also the possibility of them morphing with their aspect as well.
Exactly.
And
Right.
then becoming an aspect themselves and becoming the dominant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that would be super interesting.
Oh, it'd be amazing.
I think a lot of that is great to encapsulate in roleplay, especially. You know, not all of it has to be mechanic. A lot of it can be part of the roleplay as well. Just kind of like if you've watched any of Sensei Suplex's Soulbound campaigns, there's a lot of role playing and dialogue about characters trying to determine arcane secrets in their role in things, and trying to understand how they're changing with their own unraveling and stuff like that. It's a lot of fantastic opportunity for role play, and I think, and that's the thing that excites me the most is this is not vanilla at all. This is very spicy, very flavorful, and there's a lot of opportunity to to really investigate that as a character. James W., what would your answer to the whole building up a character embodying aspects of elemental entities?
So I've been thinking about it since you asked the question. I'm really glad the Druid took a moment to like give me some time there. Appreciate it. Good looking out, buddy. Well, I guess I'm looking at this on the thing. I guess I should be doing that. Good looking out. So I would do a high fade of the element of air, just because I think the idea of having that dominant aspect of amplification. Basically having this like mushroom person who you would think would be like, because they're super long lived and they also like live multiple lives, like you would think that they would be like this kind of quiet, reserved type person, but then they're just this super loud, garish, and just completely out there like rock dude who like almost looks like he flashes as he like walks across rooms and such because of the way that he moves
With geodes.
Yeah, like I think that would be
With geodes.
right.
Rolled along on like some rubies on the ground or something.
That would be so cool. And like, and just like he tries his best to be like the most interesting person in the room because he is an info seeker for his community. So he's trying to get as much information from everybody that he can. And the best way to do that, be the life of the party, because everybody wants to talk to the life of the party.
Hell yeah. I'm gonna ask Elderberry and Death Gauge, because both of you really, innovated a bunch of the most of the details when it comes to those elemental entities. So a character that embodies it in one way, shape, or form. Let's take Death Gauge first.
So, I would probably go with the high. I'm sorry, it was high fade,
Yes.
right?
High Fade's the popular one right now, for sure.
For now,
It's only because
right,
they're
for
the
now.
coolest.
So I would go with the high fade in the arcane territory,
Ooh, okay.
and I would go
Oh
on
my.
the side of chaos.
Yes.
strictly
Full send.
exactly. But I feel like it would be such an interesting and self-intimate form of like constant character development, because you're you're trying to exist in this society, but it's it's like everything you touch turns to dust, and it's not because of anything that you're doing of your own volition. It's something that is embedded in your nature, and I just think that would create a really weird and interesting opportunity for roleplay constantly.
Yeah.
For sure.
But I'm all about the roleplay
Definitely.
though, so I'm like, put me in a
Agreed.
battle.
Absolutely.
I'm like,
Same.
Yeah.
Anybody can swing a sword. It takes a real fun game to sit there and convince the bad guy to put his sword down.
Yeah.
It's like,
I've been there and done that so many times.
I've got a lot
So-
of DMs that don't like playing with me because I try to talk my way out of the big bad evil guy's fight.
That's the best part.
anybody can
Like,
swing
listen.
a sword, but only a few people can swing a compelling personality.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that.
Listen, we can fight if you want, but I've got money.
I can slap
go.
you with scent, baby.
So I'm gonna leave it to Elderberry to let us know what character would you build out within
Honestly-
the aspect options you got.
I think that this would be a lot of fun, and this could actually really tie in and be a really cool story point. Proto Titans are just trying to figure out what they're doing, what they are, who they are in the world, and we have growth as an Earth aspect that is perpetually stuck as a child that just wants to help things grow. So that's what he's he becomes a paladin of growth because growth wants to see him grow so much, and all he wants to do, this proto titan, all he wants to do is make growth proud and become as strong as he can for growth.
Hell yeah!
I need
Especially,
6 seasons in a movie.
Yeah.
yeah.
Can we
yeah.
just make this a party, guys? Can we just do that?
I'm here for it.
We
Right.
could make this a party. Now the nice thing is that because all of the dungeon masters are running one shots, right? But
Yeah.
that means y'all pretty much have the first choice of playing characters in any of these one shots. And if you want to pool in to if you want to pool into a specific one shot with any of these characters, that sounds like a plan in the making already.
I mean, I'm just saying, Death Gauge and I can be from the same cap, and we
Yes.
meet up with Druid and Elderberry, and yeah,
I
you
see
got
what
the
you did there.
chaotic
You
one,
said
and
cap.
there you go. See,
Like
I
a
knew if
mushroom.
anybody'd get it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm kind of
There you go.
workshopping that as the name for the communities, that they are
That's
just caps.
cool. I like
I
that.
can just see it
I
now.
like it.
We just strong arm our way in. Listen, you're a DM, and we're a hot mess. It's a perfect mesh.
I'm just gonna be a lovable Dembo. Come on, let's do it.
Go.
Let me
Let's
do it.
go.
I feel like I'm
here
gonna be
for
a
it.
glass cannon without the cannon.
It's just glass. Hell
We're
yeah.
gonna talk our way through the entire one shot.
Soup. Yeah, absolutely. Dudes. I wanna thank you for taking this opportunity to chat about the lore that y'all have been building, and we're over 90 minutes, but of course we're now basically at the point where if we want to spend, I don't know, the next 20 minutes or let's see, right where I'm at, it's 6:37. If we want to spend till 7, basically another. What are you pointing up for?
More.
Okay,
You were like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I was like,
something
Yeah.
like that. More.
Keep going.
Okay,
Go
we'll
on.
see. We'll see how far we want to go. At least another 30 minutes. But I think in that case, this would be a fantastic opportunity to start. I think I'm gonna keep it simple, because y'all have gotten, you know, recent tasks to start digging into. And if I remember, so it's Death Gauge and Elderberry. If I'm really, let's say it's Death Gauge, Elderberry, Crow, and I Am Thomas BG. In a future edition of this, I hope to have Crow, I Am Thomas, Squigums, Slippy Ran, and yeah. So like, I want to do another one of these with the other Lore Masters, but because we have 4 of you today. James W. and Sarcastic Druid, you both are working again on a task, and then Death Gauge and Elderberry are working on the same tasks. So we're gonna kind of do this again, and I'm gonna say James W. Sarcastic Druid is high, and then low is going to be low's going to be the other shoe. Sorry, see, I'm burning out a little bit.
Pins and needles. Pins and needles.
That's a 5. That is high. Did James W. and Sarcastic Druid go first last time? Because I think
we can totally take last.
All right, let's do Elderberry and Death Gauge first this time.
We won the coin toss. Don't worry, we'll kick.
Yeah.
We'll kick.
Oh boy.
That's okay. I'm gonna run it into the end zone.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, so like, it seems like these are pretty fairly broad, but tell us just what you've been, you know, thinking or cooking up recently based upon those.
So it's been at least for us, it's been a lot of talking about like the geography, the biomes, the seasons, and the weather, and kind of trying to figure out what exactly we want to do with that. And so it's been a lot of just like tossing the ball back and forth at the moment. Like we've got a few different ones that I feel like all 4 of us have probably settled on like kind of more of like a Pacific Northwest feel for the region.
Yeah, that was the consensus. Yeah.
Yeah. So very lots of hills and valleys with large mountains and deciduous and evergreen forests all throughout. So it kind of plays into that, and then you can kind of bring in some like cryptid-esque like creatures as well. You could have your Bigfoots. You could have your
multiple.
Yeah,
Bigfoots. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't those be called big feet?
No, it's Bigfoots.
Gooses.
Yeah, exactly. Geeses.
Yeah.
Mises?
Mooses.
Got a bunch of mooses. But yeah, you can get the kind of like those cryptids into the mix as well in the area, and maybe they need to pick sides as well, or they're just there for the chaos.
Can't wait to see Mothman.
Yes.
Let's bring a bunch of SCPs into here as well. Why not?
Yes.
As either regularly appearing or legendary monsters, you mean? Or are we talking about NPCs? Are we talking about aspects of the divine? There's a whole listing of how to incorporate cryptids. Like, okay, I think would be great. Actually, let's go, because this is a topic. I want everybody to choose a cryptid and immediately state where they think that cryptid, an adapted version of that cryptid would fit in terms of like monster or NPC or something. I'm gonna go Elderberry first, and then we're gonna go Death Gauge, and then we're gonna go the other two.
Wendigo consumption.
Ooh.
Now the thing
like
I do want to preface, and the only reason I say this is because I live in one of the regions where further north the Wendigo is a legend. It is a very interesting legend. It is something that is very culturally ingrained in its Native American roots.
Yes.
So of course it's incredibly important to preface that as we're doing this, it's not out of a desire to appropriate, but to derive inspiration from these legends.
Exactly.
So just prefacing in front of chat and ourselves here, but of course, I love the legend of the Wendigo, and I think I think that would having a Wendigo-like creature would be very interesting.
Yeah, and like it could be an element of or an aspect of consumption that isn't water. Like it could be a different aspect of consumption from uh, one of the other domains. So I think that one would be really interesting.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of the whole like elemental pantheon
Yeah,
that we kind of built, is things can be very fluid.
yeah.
That's what we like about it.
And I mean, a player can create their aspect that they're carrying with them and bringing up and making people believe in more as well.
If you're a domain of water, you're fluid. If you're a domain of fire, you're plasma.
Yeah.
There you go.
True.
So Death Gauge, if you had a cryptid, how would you think that a version of that cryptid would make its way into this setting in some form, like monster or NPC or aspect or whatever you believe?
So I thought about this for a couple seconds. At first, I was gonna do the rake, and then I
Okay.
thought to myself, no, because I like this idea better. So I can't think of the names right now, or the name. I mean, I think it's from Japanese folklore, but the like floating heads that
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
feast on people. Right.
Oh yeah.
I can't think of the name right now.
I
If
can't
anybody
It's
either.
knows.
not Oni.
But-
That's the only one I can think of.
I'm not 100% sure, but anyway, and I would put it in the category of chaos for quite obvious reasons. There,
Mhm.
I'm sure we can all agree
And
there.
what's the
And
name of it again? It's the cryptid. What's the name of the cryptid?
I'm looking it up. Just a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna say, because I am probably wrong, but it sounds like an Oni to me, but I can't quite remember what an Oni
Yeah.
is.
I think that might be it, actually. Now that I'm stopping to think about it, but I mean, yeah, I can't remember what they're called. Unfortunately, just bad
Floating
memory.
head. It's a Rokuro Kubi.
Fair enough.
Give me this. Drop the spelling in as. Oh, somebody did.
Possibly.
Ha-ha!
Yeah, my brother did.
Super. Thank you. I
Thank
sincerely appreciate it.
But yeah, I was thinking about it in the chaos domain of Arcane, obviously, and where I kind of came up with that is the whole idea of like, there's probably a bunch of souls that didn't make it onto this city that were, left to die on the ground. You'd be probably a pretty vengeful spirit outside of
Yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that was my second thought. I was gonna do the rake just for fun, but
Right. So I think it would be amazing, and it makes sense. Yeah. I imagine during this entire circumstance where the surface was taken over by Fae and individuals were forced to go to the sky, I can't get over this idea or fact that it couldn't have happened slowly. It had to have been a crisis, and people must have like died in the rush to get everything, like it's a tide of green incoming, and we only have a few days to make sure that this ship is working in tall order. And like I don't want to create horrific thoughts in people's minds, but the fact of a bunch of people on the surface running and not making it and reaching
there
up
was
and being
that.
like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was also a contemplation of like how the city possibly took off and where it was located beforehand, that we've been kind of tossing around for geography's sake. Maybe on the top of a mountain that was built into the top, because it made me think of like Mount St. Helens and like how it erupted, but being built into the tip of a mountain and then ripping off the tip of the mountain, leaving a massive crater in its place on top of that mountain when it lifted off. So it could be built in secrecy, and only the town knew, and also makes sense why it was like one of the last living bastions of civilization, since it was highly defensible being inside of a mountain.
and already secluded.
Yeah, and already secluded and hard to get to.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
that
like
could
that
be.
idea. I got that on notes for sure.
Yeah.
I thought of a different way for it to be like continuously or perpetually floating
Sure.
too, because I actually had asked Jeff at one day. I was like, it was completely random. I just out of nowhere was like, do they have a way that the city is floating already? And somebody had said something about gems or something like that, I guess. And I was like, well, I got a better idea, or at least I think it's a better idea. And I was thinking about the fact, because obviously if there's going to be any Fae that are ever captured,
Uh-huh.
nobody's going to like them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I remember
no.
the discussion.
So I was like, hey guys, or I was like, hey Jeff, what do you think about slave labor?
Oh, geez. So like,
That's- Ooh.
wasn't the talk about like certain? I thought it was about certain elemental beings that are contained, or certain beings that are contained that are responsible for the continuous levitation, and that you have
Yeah, I don't
like a team of people. Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch. Been a whole bunch of versions of this discussed, and I think that one. I'm wondering. I was just wondering if that one was close to one of the other versions. But like, how exactly in that version, what creates the propulsion?
So one of the things that I had thought about, so like I said, slave labor. I was thinking along the lines of like, since it's steampunk in nature, I'm sure there could be some form of like generator or like a battery cell of some kind or whatever, because just because you have these gems of whatever they are or whatever kind they are, doesn't mean that they're going to last forever on their own. So the classic trope of like hook them ball and chain to this like spinning lever or something like that. I didn't go into too much detail on it. It's just kind of like a little nugget of an idea that I thought
Little
about.
thought process. Yeah.
Right.
Little spitball.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
spin it around a thing, charge up whatever the thing is, and then feed it to the thing so the gem can do the thing.
There you go.
We might have to think that one over, because I know that there's I think there's a policy thing with Project Aurora about the idea of that sort of servitude. But I do like the aspect of utilizing, basically having captured some specific Fae beings or some maybe elementally proficient Fae beings that are responsible for keeping the generators running, right?
Right.
Well, and
through
like
their-
you could also there's also the possibility of, I mean, everybody has to use nature or elemental magic at some point in time. I mean, that's where all magic like stem from.
Right.
So what's to say that there aren't people whose entire job is maintaining a relationship with aspects that keep the city afloat?
I almost feel like,
Fair too.
have y'all seen Chernobyl?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Like, let's set aside the actual Chernobyl accident, or the accident that is as it happens in the show, but like, I could just imagine a team of like experts in that control room that are responsible for making sure that the generators are running, and they are, very scientifically like recording like what's the performance of these particular elemental slash Fae creatures. Oh, I see. Okay, they're performing pretty well. We have a backstock. It's like that's where my mind goes. Like there's like a group of like, it's a mixture of like blue collar engineers and like really like nerdy artificers who are trying to like maintain this thing. And I could just imagine one of these nerdy artificers like staring into one of the chambers being like, it's so beautiful, like that weird twisted, like it's captured and it doesn't have freedom. But you're beautiful.
The fascination of that which is taboo.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and see,
yeah.
the thing that makes me think of, like, especially if it were aspects, in like maybe people or someone was assigned to create that connection with the aspects to keep them strong. What if they were twin aspects, so that when you made one strong, you made the other, you would have almost a sort of perpetual battery going.
Yeah. A perpetual, because like I'm sure that at some, you know, and the performance isn't absolutely the same all the time. So being able to kind of store that energy is important.
What?
I think we did talk a little bit about an idea sort of like this, and I floated the title the Ministry of Propulsion. That like that's the group that is responsible for maintaining you know, the propulsion of the city and stuff.
Arguably the most important ministry in the entire city.
Right.
Yeah.
So another little thing that I'd come up with was well, somebody had said something. I think that was you, Jeff. Said like the water, like the lake, was
Oh yeah,
magical
like
radiation.
wherever it was like
Hole
out
that was left, a
or
crater.
yeah. So wherever it lifted off, left a crater that was filled with water, and then that water. Yeah, that water became radiated and actually created the deadlands of the region. So that would also be a good reason why the Fae would be fighting, because when they lifted off, they started killing the land. But
Right.
yeah.
So one of the things I come up with on that was, what if there were, like, from time to time, these like water spouts that would kind of come up, you know, reach up and like tap it, and these like generators or the gems or whatever would out of nowhere get these like supercharged shots.
A boost in
And I
energy
was like,
output.
you know, that could be interesting.
Right. That could be.
That could be interesting. And all of a sudden, like, there's the city, you know, and all of a sudden it's just going like that because it like tapped this gem over here or whatever. So it's like
Stabilizing systems.
Could be purpose or fuel for the green tide. And so I want to make sure I didn't miss that last point so that I get it down. In simple words, what was the revelation just now that you had just
that it would
talked
tap
about?
and give it like a boost of energy. The water spouts would go up and
like slap a gem.
Yeah, slap a gem and give it more power than it was.
The water spouts out of the crater, the radiated crater.
Yeah.
Right, because so eventually, you know, this crater would end up getting filled with water.
The radiator.
Anywho, and just because of the fact that it would be irradiated with arcane energy in its nature, you know, it would have tumultuous weather, create these water spouts. Water spouts would reach up and like slap a gem. It would get supercharged with energy, arcane energy out of nowhere. And like I was saying, it could create interesting scenarios because all of a sudden, you know, you have your city.
Yeah.
And it's like, say there's like a gem here, gem here, gem here, gem here, right? And they like kind of stabilize each other and balance, or harmonic balance, whatever you want to say there. One of them gets slapped, and then all of a sudden the whole thing starts going like that because it's got more propulsion in that direction.
Right.
So it was just something that I like randomly thought of.
Gotcha. I got that down. I said touched necessarily as opposed to slapped, but it's the same thing.
Oh, sucker punched. Come on.
That could also be a scenario
Sucker
too,
punched.
where it's like that's what like the Ministry of Propulsion has to like try and schedule or like recognize how to counteract that.
Oh,
or like meteorologists.
Yeah.
Predict. That's the word.
And they would have to like be able to like throttle down if something like that happened.
Exactly.
Sort of kind of a situation.
Yeah.
Or they have to discharge it very quickly or put it into a capacitor that they have set up. And if they don't, if somebody falls asleep on the job, then it could be detrimental for the city.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like,
Yeah.
there's a possibility that if somebody's asleep at the switch and it gets hit by a powerful enough spout of water, it flips the city over.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
exactly.
at least that's the fear that they instill in you at the Ministry of Propulsion.
The mop.
Fire spouts are deadly.
At the mop. The Ministry of Propulsion.
Yeah.
That's it.
Working with that mop.
See, now I'm just imagining like
Or the Meop,
people who are trying to like keep all of these guys awake the entire time, and they become the mop cops.
The
Mop
mop
cops.
cops.
The mop
What's your
cops.
symbol? A mop?
The mop mob.
That makes me that sort of makes me think like I don't know if the city and maybe I'm a little confused here because we got the Clockwork Titan, which I don't know if that is the city or if that is like separate from the city. I don't know for sure.
Yes, but actually no.
Yes, but actually no.
It's
But,
been kind of tossed around a couple different ideas of like what the Clockwork Titan
Sure.
is, but
And how much it
I
is
think
involved
maybe that
in
ought
the
to
city.
be a focus in this cycle to make that 100% and
Yeah.
crystallize and be like, don't move this is it.
this is
Because
the
right
thing
here.
now.
we all understand like coming up with these ideas is fucking amazing. But the biggest challenge is that idea confirmation. It's like
Yeah.
this and specifically
Definitely.
this is it's gonna happen, right?
Yeah. Where do we make the cogs stop? Because
Exactly.
we need they need to stop at some point.
Exactly.
right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wanna pick up on the cryptid talk, and I wanna go to Sarcastic Druid and James W because we missed both of you. We may as well
Righto.
get those pieces in.
Sorry.
So no worries. The cryptid that I immediately thought of was Bigfoot, except like I'm picturing Bigfoot as
Biggerfoot.
taking after the an Earth aspect. I'm not entirely sure which one, but for some reason I'm also just picturing them as a blacksmith, just Bigfoot the blacksmith working with the Earth.
Pressure.
Yes. Could you say that they're under pressure?
Under pressure.
Oh my God! Stop.
Ding 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 diggy ding ding.
I'll show myself.
I love this group so much.
This is why we have to be a party.
Yeah.
For sure. I feel bad for whatever DM runs for us, but like we
Oh,
should
dear God.
definitely.
I don't feel bad, honestly, because it's just gonna be so much fun.
So
on our
Matt,
end.
you want to run us?
What?
That's what I'm hearing, right?
Oh no.
I mean, I decided that when I run my one shot, maybe I haven't decided 100%, but right now the thing that I am like head over heels captured by as an idea is a train robbery or train raid one shot.
Nice.
I'm so down.
Because the thing is like there hasn't been discussion on rail, but if you have a Clockwork Titan that's as big as it is, there has to be a central like rail system from
Oh,
the
yeah.
top
Rail
to the
system for
bottom.
sure.
There has to be something like
They
that.
call it the nervous system.
Be right back.
And
I hear something at
because
the door.
Write that
Okay.
down. Write that down.
we got
I
switched
am
around
now.
here, so I apologize for
No.
that. But
I am now Death
am
Gate.
now
you're
Elderberry.
Death Gate, Elderberry. So what was I going to mention? It was having to do with the Clockwork Titan, having to do with rail. Because I know like where I'm positioned in the one-shot schedule, we kind of based it roughly on the 3x structure a little bit. And mine comes right after the midpoint where there's supposed to be some sort of big twist. So I'm hoping that whatever we figure out, that it's gonna be like the bad guys have taken something and the players have to chase them through this train, or they've taken over the train and they have something extremely important and they're headed to a specific location where if they get to that location with the item, then that will devastate something,
They've got the arcane
it's this
eye.
race against time kind of thing. That's what I'm hoping to run as a DM myself.
Now we're back in
Nice.
order.
But returning to the topic, I think last but not least, who didn't say anything about the cryptid thing yet? Was that James?
That is me
JW.
so far. So I've been so I'm from Texas, so I tried to find some kind of like local flair. And one of the things that I did is the Lechuza, which is a shape-shifting witch spirit of Hispanic folklore.
Lechuza?
Lechuza.
Lakusa.
Okay.
And I kind of imagine that she would have the reclamation aspect of Earth, but the only thing is, she kind of is trying to reclaim what the Fae has lost, bit by attacking the adventuring parties that the city sends down.
That's a
By
good one.
attacking adventuring parties. Gotcha.
Yep. Yeah.
He's like, thanks for all this info, guys. I'm just gonna
write these little stat blocks
Yeah.
up now.
There you go.
into my
Thank you for
information
this.
bag of holding, and see you guys.
Thanks for this lore soup.
Thanks for the lore dump.
It's good soup. It's good
A
soup.
little
soup.
bit of,
Good soup.
little bit of,
Good soup.
little bit of Sasquatch, little bit of Pacific Northwest biome, just a little pinch of that Omnisci.
It tastes like coffee and salmon for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, maybe
can't figure out
you
why.
have COVID. That's why.
I'm just saying. Go talk to a halfling or a goblin. They'll get you sorted.
I live in Portland, so but it just smells like coffee and salmon around here all the
Fair.
time.
Um, okay, so we're at least locally 7:05. I'm gonna say we go. We can go on for just a few more minutes, one more round of things, and then I'll wrap it up. And we talked about task 1, and that ended up getting into cryptids. So I think let's talk task 2. Now, task 2 is interesting because it was talking about the cultural templates of each race and broad culture of the entire city itself: perils, joys, products, hope. And these were encapsulated, I think, in the world anvil. Were they?
Yes, not all of them.
Not all of them. So they're pretty much up there. Y'all did really really great content for that. So if we want to talk a little bit about that content,
Sure.
and then also talk about overall broad culture of the city, that'd be a cool thing to touch up on too.
Sure. So, kind of starting with the assignment, like, of course, we were to kind of flesh out the culture of each race through a series of questions, talking about like the perils they face, the joys that they celebrate, the products that they give, the hopes that they have, and that sort of thing. And so, with each race, we took those questions in mind and tried to take the information we already have, like on the page for each race, and kind of take that and see how that would apply in any given situation. Like, for example, just talking about the dwarves, because those are easily becoming some of my favorites.
Right.
So, holidays in the dwarf race is especially interesting because in dwarves you've got regular dwarves, you've got halflings, and you have gnomes. And the way we've kind of fleshed it out is that halflings are very good at designing, and they tend to keep aesthetics at the forefront. And gnomes, the kind of yin to their yang, are equally good at designing, but tend to keep practicality and efficiency at the forefront, and dwarves keep the balance in between. And so what we did for holidays was, for example, there's a holiday that dwarves celebrate called First Life, or Gerald's Day, or Gerald's Day.
Gerald.
And yeah, I love the name.
Gerald's Day.
Squiggums came up with it. It's so good. But so it's a holiday celebrating their first automaton coming to life, and this could possibly be after a specific creator who created that first automaton, but it's evolved into a celebration of their own ability to create, and they take special interest, gnomes especially, in celebrating the first thing that a gnome has created or designed as part of them becoming an official member of the gnome society, of like expressing that innate creativity.
Kind of
And
like
so-
baby's
Mhm.
first creation type thing.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, and so we're-
exemplifying what a gnome has created as part of their cultural initiation.
Right.
Is that the
Just
idea?
a gnome holiday, or is it like a dwarven holiday and a halfling holiday as well?
So it's kind of all three. The dwarves
It's more of a
celebrate
difference
it.
in celebration, really, like
Exactly.
how they celebrate these days versus them
Right.
being completely different holidays.
Yeah, different aspects of the same thing.
Okay.
So like everybody has a quote unquote first life holiday, which is Gerald's Day for the dwarves. The gnomes are, what do we call it, Rumpelstein, and then
Rumpelstein.
and then the halflings know it as Life Day.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rumpelstein. It's the same holiday, though, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so this whole task and this whole process has allowed us to not only kind of build off of what we had, but also create new lore while explaining these holidays and these different aspects of culture
Mhm.
that's really made the different races come alive. And also, it has allowed us to sprinkle in a little bit of flavor where it may have been lacking, as for example, our elves.
Right.
So one thing that we kind of did with this that I kind of wanted to touch on, that to me kind of gives a good feel of what each race kind of brings to the city. One of the things they asked us to do was products. Basically, kind of, and we read that as what products do they create, what products do they make, and what do they add to the city. So if it's cool, I kind of wanted to go through a couple of those just to kind of give a feel of like what each individual race brings to things. So we've got I like going against the grain with stereotypes for races. So one of the things that I feel like really does that and exemplifies that is our orc races, which breaks down into orcs, goblins, and bugbears. So one of the things that we kind of figured that goblins could be really, really good at was dealing with trash, fermentation, brewing, distilling, using the ability to like rot food to a certain point to like help enhance its flavor profile and that sort of thing. So what goblins bring to the city is beer, fermentation of food, hipster dining restaurants, and chemical processes. Because to us, goblins are really, really interested in anything alchemical.
Brewing.
So
too,
they're
right?
exactly. So they're the ones that like they are the ones that make potions. They also kind of they're kind of pharmacists in a way as well.
Oh, gotcha. So like
Which is an
apothecary.
A millennial.
Yeah.
It's a millennial hipster. All goblins are millennial hipsters.
Also,
Yeah, pretty much.
drug dealers like, hey, I got this stuff for you.
Yup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's not downplay the drug
Oh,
dealer
right,
aspect
exactly.
of it.
Like, well, that's also millennial. I'm sorry, I hit it all.
Oh yeah, no, you hit everything.
You've got us there.
The problem.
And unfortunately, the entire time that I've been talking about the goblins while we were making all of this, I was just like, God, these are such fucking hipsters. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Oh no.
That's-
So
They'll
the
look like me.
there you go.
Damn you, Jim.
So the other thing that we did was we also decided that the bugbears would be that on the ground they were hunters, gatherers, farmers, and did animal husbandry because they were more of like a mobile hunter-gatherer civilization. So we were trying to figure out how we could transition that into a sky city. So what the bugbears do is they are the farmers. They're the factory farmers. Maybe I should rephrase. They come up. They're the ones that do all the planting. They're the ones that have figured out crops and how to make them grow in a city that is not connected to the ground. And because of their large size and their stature, they also send adventuring parties to the ground to collect soil and to collect plants and to collect animals. Like if they hear that there's like an aurochs that exists somewhere in this area, then they'll send a team down to grab the aurochs and bring it back up to try and breed more to create more food.
Mm-hmm. So they're also responsible for the beasts of burden in the city, right?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Yes. Yep. And the final ones, the orcs themselves, we really kind of turned everything about them on their heads, which I'm so happy about. So the orcs started on the ground millennia ago, before the Sky City, as the basic stereotypical orcs, conquestors, war bands, that sort of thing. But one of the things that orcs were really good at because of that, whenever you're running an army, what is the one thing that you need to make sure that you're really good at?
You need to have good toilet paper.
That for one, but also logistics.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we're on the same thing.
Sourcing things, being tactitional, like thought process and all of that, they are now the heads of business in the city. They are God, I hate this fucking
Or like
word.
the shipping departments and
Statisticians? Yeah. They are statisticians. They do accounting. They do business management. They do product management. They do all the logistics of the city. They are the guys who just, if you want something done, you want it done efficiently, and you want it done cheap, you go call an orc. And that's kind of where we've put them in. Pretty much, yeah.
But not. So let's say orcs, heads of business, logistics, accounting, product management. Are they the ones basically running? They're running most of the businesses, or that's their strength. It's just administrative. Stuff.
I kind of imagine that they run a lot of the businesses just because of their natural affinity at accounting. But I also feel like they're also kind of hired out to other places to like help them improve efficiency.
Awesome.
And they also, if there is a defense of the city that is needed, the absolute thing that you want to do is you want to get an orc involved, because they still maintain a lot of their martial history.
Right.
They're an accountant that can kick your ass.
Exactly.
As they should be.
You don't
Make sure to stay up on your taxes.
Yeah, and
I see that you haven't paid taxes in 3 years,
Could you
Gerald.
imagine like a human Karen walking up and being like, "I want to speak with your Actually,
Never mind.
I don't want to speak with your manager."
It's like, I want to speak, and
My
then just like an
manager is
orc
much
walks
bigger.
up behind.
Yeah, and so
that's a whole campaign plot.
it really
Karen
is.
versus orc.
And all of these have given us a chance to really flesh out these different races and give them flavor that they may have not had before. And I checked with James to make sure that this could be something said. We figured something out earlier that we think is going to be pretty amazing to incorporate, and I think you guys are going to love it. But so, like I said earlier, our elves at some point were just a little bit bland, so we decided to work with them a little bit more, see what we could get out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided that the Eladrin, of course, they've got a little bit of the Tiefling lot, where since they're the most Fey touched, they're a little bit of outcasts in this new setting. And the High Elves are the scholars of their surroundings. They are the knowledge seekers and the knowledge explorers. The Wood Elves maintain their connection to nature and have a particularly strong hatred of the Fae, more than a lot of the other humanoid races. And we were trying to decide, why would this be? Like, what's the big connection here? And then James came up with an amazing idea that we both just ran with. But Wood Elves, with their connection to nature, have an especially strong hatred against the Fae, because the world tree that the Fae control, that is their counterpart of the Titan, was not originally theirs. It was the Wood Elves.
The Wood Elves. Ooh.
They corrupted
Wood Elves
it.
were the ones that planted
Who'd
it.
have thunk that the Wood Elves might have had the big tree first?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's insane, Jeff. Relax.
I know. I
Can't wait to see how it
can't
plays
connect those dots.
Relax.
Well, and one thing too about the world tree that the Fae is that we're kind of still workshopping this, so
Yeah,
this is still kind of a
absolutely.
work in progress. But one thing that we kind of thought was really interesting was that they created the world tree, and as it became more powerful and all that, that's what actually drew the ire of the Fae. So potentially, the Wood Elves are kind of not only responsible for the Fae, but that's part of the reason why they hate the Fae so much, is because they're kind of the reason they exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were the creators, and now it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I created all of this, and now you guys hate me.
God.
I
Tony
am
Stark
your
with
dad.
I could just imagine if there were like smaller airships that were used as like bombardiers or whatever, that the prolific pilot for that would be like a wood elf, would be like, it's like that kind of personality you get from certain
Guy from Independence Day.
right, well, from certain IPs that have a representation of the military, particularly the fighter pilot, who's like, he's all ready to go, and I'm ready to go into it. Once again, Pandora, the fighter pilot from that is, I am in it to kill some Fae. It's like,
For sure. Like, I kind of imagine that, like, a lot of the quote unquote military of the city, whenever they need to have something like that, like their biggest what am I thinking of? Volunteers would be the Wood Elves, because they'd be like, I'm sorry, we're doing an attack on the Fae, let's go.
We're a militia. We're always ready.
Clear my schedule.
Exactly.
Let's hit them.
Sounds
They're
a
the
lot like
preppers. The Wood Elves are the
like the
preppers.
RuneScape, no.
Yes.
They've got a bug out bag.
yeah. Preppers
Yeah.
with a bug out bag.
He's got a Toyota Tacoma with a cap. He's got a bed inside that thing.
I'm ready
so-
to jump off this thing and go and kill some more Fae.
So recent history, or recent ongoing history of displacement and nomad-like tendencies as a result of this is kind of like what I'm getting as an impression. Not literally nomads, but like, imagine you're somebody where your home got destroyed or taken over and you have no home anymore. So no matter where
Refugees.
you are,
Yeah,
Um,
refugees.
displacement, refugee. So one of the most prominent to take up a life of adventuring or something that does not pin them to a location, because there is that past trauma of I don't have a home,
Man, I cannot get the image of a wood elf just like to the Wonder Woman theme music, just being like, it's go time, and running towards the edge of the city and then just jumping off and just go through the clouds. Do 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 do.
Yeah, exactly.
Hits like a slow fall and just like whoosh. Totally
One of
ready.
those
Oh, man.
squirrel suits or whatever, the ones that has like
Yeah.
the flaps.
Yeah. I just watched the Batman, and when he pulled out his, just
Yeah, like
flying
that, yeah.
down. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, so I think now is about the time to. We're getting over 2 hours, which is cool. But let's wrap it up in the next 8 minutes here, so
Let's
that we
do
got
it.
a solid 2.5 hours.
Bet.
Is there? Let's see. Is there any particular thing that we want to like deep dive in for the next 8 minutes? I know it's like very open forum, but like any big questions that anybody has that you think is something worth answering, based upon the stuff that we've talked about. Like, we've talked about products of these different races. We've talked previously about the holidays. We've talked previously from that about, how is the city floating? We already kind of have an idea of where it took off, geography features. what are big? Anybody at all have any big questions?
The height, how high, what's the elevation? I keep thinking about this. Like, we need to actually like hammer down this freaking elevation for how high this is.
Yeah.
Like, it's been a
Okay.
topic, and we need to kind of figure this out, and it doesn't really fall into anybody's category right now, but we need to figure it out.
Okay.
I've always
Right.
kind of assumed it was like right about even with the jet stream in modern day.
Okay, yeah.
But that
And-
feels really high for people to live.
Well, also,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like if it popped off of the top of a mountain.
hmm
I was thinking, I pitched this already, like just at the top of the mid layer of clouds. So the bottom is underneath the cloud layer, but the top, like the good part of the city, that isn't
The
like all of the
royalty.
cities. Yeah, and the royalty, it makes it look like they're sitting on a sea of clouds.
Yes.
So everybody else has
That's
to be underneath.
Yeah.
When he had mentioned that, I was like, we could have with that, because of the arcane, distribution of like from the water spouts, stuff like that, we could have differing weather at different layers of the city.
Yeah.
Not like
Mhm.
from this side to the left, to this side, 500 feet over there, like up and down.
Oh,
Yeah.
just think of the thoughts of like being down in the undercity, of having those kind of like Victorian, like just filled with mist and everything going through like streets in the undercity, or like late or early in the morning and stuff, where the clouds are possibly a little bit higher and just like go over all of the city a bit, like kind of gives that cool feel. I
Yeah,
don't
for
know.
sure.
Yeah. Well, and there was some thoughts thrown around that like we could also potentially, like we say, have those layers of the city where it's like, the undercity is all of the type of like the engineers and all of that, the industrial districts and that sort of thing, and also, I mean, let's be honest, probably where the criminals hang out in the high crime areas. Mid cities would probably be where most people either live. There's the upper mid cities and the lower mid cities. It's almost like it's an allegory for class. And then above them is the
class system. What hierarchies?
and then at the very top, obviously, is the leaders, the nobility, and like basically the head honchos.
Big cheese.
Well, and-
it's just like the movie Snowpiercer. Basically, we just create a sky city out of Snowpiercer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Son of a bitch, we did.
Yeah.
So
The only thing that it isn't is that our city stays pretty much in one area. But if it went around, like that would.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But if we also, I think that what if we said that like some of the they were able to get like energy from the clouds? That's why they actually put the industrial area underneath the clouds, so they're actually like siphoning in.
That's where they get their water.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where they get their
That's where they
water.
get the
Is the water vapor,
Yeah,
and like
that's where they get their water.
now I'm just imagining like a bottom of it that's because it's cut from the mountain. Like you just see like this giant like iceberg made of earth, but then on the very bottom you just see these giant fans that just like just
sucking in.
constantly sucking in clouds
sure.
and filtering them through.
Oh yeah, and as a filter,
Yeah.
and also that's how they obtain water.
Yeah,
And that's how they push it back when the spouts hit on the front, is they can push down to equalize.
yeah.
So one thing that I do want to float out there, I don't know who. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's a triple pun actually, because it's what I'm
Love
about to
triple
talk
puns.
about. Has anybody seen the movie The Aeronauts?
No.
Anybody familiar with it? Okay. It is a
Nope.
more recent movie. It's like a original Amazon movie. Eddie Redmayne is in it. Felicity Jones is in it. Basically, it
Good
is
skip
the point of the movie is that it's located in 1862, about a daredevil balloon pilot.
Nice.
And the other person is the person who's pioneering meteorology, and so they both get into a flying an air balloon with a bunch of like gadgets and gizmos and stuff, and they go up, and it's a fantastic movie that explains to you how things change the higher you go up, and how like you get to a certain point, and you will probably freeze to death, right?
So,
Yeah, for sure.
so the thing that we have on our side is magic.
Oh yeah,
we can
not wrong.
magic away a lot of different things. Like
we can,
there's
but
it's a
it
snow
also
globe now.
does a lot good for world building to kind of like
Yeah.
sync it up with physics as well.
Sure.
But yes, anything that we don't want to explain, we can
Yeah.
absolutely just use magic.
Magic.
We pulled a Bethesda with the dragon breaks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it happened, but it didn't.
Well,
That's always been one of my things as a DM. Is just like if somebody tries to quote, well, how does that work? That doesn't like physics doesn't let that work that
I
way.
don't
And I'm just
know.
like, that's
Magic.
crazy because this is a fantasy world and
Yeah.
magic exists. You also
Well-
can't create a fireball out of midair either, but people do it all the time.
Oh, you're upset that book burned, and didn't actually exist. Oh, okay. But all of your clothes stayed on. Okay.
Okay, right, sure.
Super. Yeah, I think so. I think that's gonna do it for this stream. We
Sounds good.
basically encapsulated a bunch of ideas. Now, I rewrote some of the stuff that was already kind of mentioned here, because I don't know what it was sort of like pinpointing what was absolutely new and what wasn't. But it's all in this doc, and I will share the doc with y'all.
Perfect.
I got the hyphaid mushrooms and the proto titans. I didn't mention the other one because the other one is already super fleshed out.
True.
And I only started with the mushrooms when it was talking about burning as an exile, because I was like, oh, that seems like a new thing. So I'll share this doc with y'all, and we're gonna wrap it up for this session. So once again, I want to thank everybody that has tuned into the stream and has showed their support for these fantastic individuals. And once again, this is part of a collective project called Project Aurora, which is a living universe setting, and we are creating a setting, developing a setting called Green Tides and Clockwork Skies. And once again, the individuals what we have been speaking with this evening are lore masters, people who are responsible for creating the background lore and background story with this setting. So once again, we had Death Gauge, the magnificent and amazing Death Gauge. We've had the omnipotent and all-powerful James W.
Ooh.
Thank you for having me.
We have had the studious, the renowned, the world-class professor, Elderberry. And we've had the ethereal, the magical, the mythological, sarcastic druid. And my name is Matt, and I'm your chaotic writer. It has been a pleasure and a privilege, and I and these fantastic people will see y'all later. And I will see y'all in the next episode. So everybody say goodbye.
Bye.
See you later,
Bye.
guys. Thanks for tuning in.
See you later.
Adios.